we've spent a month now talking about the core things, all right, the essentials of what we're all about. And we have pretty much focused on core beliefs, really. We've talked about identity in Christ. We've talked about the Father's heart and our union with Christ in his death and resurrection and ascension. And last week, we talked about the full picture of the Trinity, the wonder and the beauty of the truth that we all come from a very happy, very glorious, divine family known as the Father, Son, and Spirit. And that is our original blessing, by the way. If I could just fit in one more kind of core belief, that would be it. That's a phrase you should definitely be familiar with. A lot of churches and a lot of religious institutions focus on original sin. And there should be a very clear understanding of sin. Sin is real, and it's a problem, and it's something we don't deny or seek to eliminate in all of its ugliness and destructiveness. The problem is when churches and leaders and individuals start the story in Genesis 3 instead of Genesis 1. Genesis 3 is where the problem set in. It's where really deception came in, and we forgot who we are, and we forgot who God is. And that led to a whole bunch of problems. But in Genesis 1 is where we see God the Father, his Word, Jesus, and the Spirit together breathing the universe into existence and then forming humanity and starting us off with a blessing of love. And that's our starting place, and this is what Jesus came to restore us to. And all of this stuff that we've been talking about, this is what the world desperately needs to hear. This is why there are refugees in the nations. This is why there's political upheaval and riots and everything that we see. This is why there's disease. This is the message that brings healing to the nations. And so today is where we close this up and we transition into the final part of this series where we're going to talk now about the vision God has given us and the mandate we have from the Lord for our town, our region, and really regions way beyond us, the Northeast, and going into other countries. To do that today, I want to revisit two prophetic images, two plant metaphors that God has given us regarding the church. Because in these images holds the essence of our vision and of where we're headed. If you want to put up the two different, big surprise, right? All right, well, these really are core images, core metaphors for us as a church, the almond tree and the sunflower. And I want to focus first today on the sunflower, okay? So let me refer back first to a series that we did in 2017. When we announced the name change of the church, we did an 8-part series going much, much deeper into all of these things called The True Church Rising. And it was a powerful 8 weeks together. It's all available on the app and on YouTube. You just got to scroll down a little bit because it was, 2017. But to make a very long story short, the sunflower, was something the Lord spoke regarding the church as a representation of the church, representing more specifically what it means to gather as a church, to have community, whether that's here or in a home or anywhere. And there's a promise that we have from God as a community. And if you're with us to any extent, you need to be aware of this promise, because this isn't a promise to me or to our leadership team. It's a promise to us, to all of us that are connected in any way or another. And this promise is of a sunflower movement, a multiplication of people and communities of believers spreading throughout this region and further, okay? And I'm going to unpack this a little bit more about the sunflower and revisit this so we're just all on the same page with this. So the sunflower, I'm sure many of you know, follows the sun throughout the day. Like, it literally moves as the sun goes from east to west in the sky. The sunflower, especially in its formative season, its early growth, it follows the sun across the sky, and then it returns at night every day to the east. And that is quite a beautiful picture of the church, because the church is a group of people who are called to be focused on the Son of God. Now, remember, we talked about Jesus being our mirror when we started this whole series. Jesus is our mirror. He is the revealer of our true identity and our destiny. In other words, Jesus shows you where you come from, and he shows you where you're going. And as we look to him, we are metamorphosized. We're transformed into the same glorious image. We begin to look like him, and when we do this together, we become a community of little Christs on earth. And that's what the word Christian means. That's what it originally was. That's what they were terming these Christians that were spreading throughout the nations after persecution broke out in Jerusalem. That's when this new name Christian, little Christ, started to pick up. And this metaphor is so beautiful because as the sunflower grows and follows the sun, it matures and it blossoms, and then it eventually starts to look like the sun, right? Like, it's not just given that name because it follows the sun. It's given that name because it has this look of radiant sunshine with its bright yellow petals. And that is exactly what happens when we gather around the sun, which really means we gather around the communion table, okay? Around who Jesus is and what he's done in his death and resurrection, we begin to look like him. And this is the Trinity's plan for the earth. The Trinity's plan is to populate the earth with lookalikes of the Son of God. You with me? In all different types of varieties of people, like all kinds of shapes, colors, sizes, nationalities, personalities. But to have still the earth filled with people who look like the sun. So let's look at Romans 8:29. This is such a perfect scripture to give to you in terms of vision and what it looks like. Can you put that up? For he knew all about us before we were born, and he destined us from the beginning to share the likeness of his Son. Let me read that again. You didn't hear it. He knew all about us before we were born. And he destined us from the beginning to share the likeness of his Son. This means the Son is the oldest among a vast family of brothers and sisters who will become just like him. So I had this word about the sunflower, something the Lord just dropped into my heart in 2010, a couple months before I had the surprise of my life and I became a senior pastor of a church at 24 years old, something I was not expecting or looking for. But for about 3 months, I was getting this word, sunflower. And I just continued to carry it for about 7 years until we did this True Church Rising series, and we changed the name of the church. And it was only then that I really started to research this word, sunflower, and learn more about these particular flowers. And I was especially shocked to find out that the sunflower is not just one flower. It's not one flower. In botany terms, it's called a composite flower, which means that it is actually a bunch of flowers. It's many flowers with their own biology that come together to form what looks like one flower. Isn't that amazing? And I found this out after all this other revelation on the church, and after, knowing that the sunflower follows the sun, it looks like the sun. But how perfect is that? Because the church is comprised of people who are all unique, and yet we all come together as brothers and sisters to form one body that look like the sun. So during that time in 2017, the Lord added to this word, and that's what he'll do in our journey sometimes. You only get fragments, you get puzzle pieces, and you have to just walk with him and trust him, and you don't understand everything he's saying. But I got this other puzzle piece kind of revealed, actually, the morning that Bill Vanderbush, one of the mornings, Bill Vanderbush was here, and he was going to speak to our leadership team. And I woke up in the morning, and I heard so clearly the phrase, the royal sunflower seed. And again, I'm shortening the story and passing a lot of details, but essentially this connected with the vision to plant the seed of the gospel, which is the message, the stuff we've been talking about, the message of the Trinity, the finished work of the cross, the Father's heart, and everything we have here, that as we plant that seed in different ways, in different settings, amongst different people groups, we're going to begin to see more and more people coming together around the sun, around the table, who will begin to look more and more like Jesus, more and more like the Trinity, which is a family. And in that, people will begin doing the works of Jesus, looking like him in their families, in their neighborhoods, and in their workplace, and all kinds of other arenas. And this is what we want to see multiplied. This is what I mean by a sunflower movement. So we've been given this royal sunflower seed. And the seed that produces this movement, what it is this message of God's grace and identity. And our mandate here is to equip every believer, young and old, everyone, to be able to plant this seed and to give strategy to impact our communities, our families. So that kind of just sums up the vision, okay? Where we believe God is taking us, some core things he's spoken to us. But the other image I mentioned is of a different plant, and that gets into the mission of how we're going to get there. So this is a field of almond trees, and the almond tree shows up in the Bible on many occasions. And as many of you know well by now, very well, this tree is known throughout the nation of Israel, and I got to go in 2017 to Israel and actually see an almond tree there and learn about its biblical significance right as we were announcing the name change, and that was a totally separate thing. It was this beautiful experience I had out in Nazareth, actually, is where I saw an almond tree. And but anyway, it's known there and in other nations as the first tree to blossom at the end of winter. And so it has these beautiful pink and white blossoms that are like the signal fire that declares the end of winter, announcing the beginning of a new era called springtime. And the word almond in the Hebrew is translated into English as the word awake. Okay, so it's the same word that we use for awake. So literally in the Hebrew tongue, it's called the tree of awakening. And the reason is how it wakes up first, and it calls out to the other trees to wake up from their winter slumber, to open their closed buds and allow the hidden fragrance and color on the inside to ignite outwardly. And that just speaks so powerfully, so clearly to our mission as a church, because we live in a world filled with sleeping trees, so to speak, okay? The buds of people's hearts are so often closed, and yet on the inside of every person, and everybody in this room say, every person. I don't care what it looks like on the outside, if there's I don't care if it's a blizzard on top, okay? No matter what it looks like, inside of every single person is the image and glory of their true Father. Inside every person is destiny and hope. The hope of glory lies within humanity. There is great hope for this world. Maybe I can get a little more than a head nod on that one. Some of you aren't sure about it. Some of you digest the news way more than you digest the word. There is a winter of sin that's undeniable, and a winter of unbelief. But it is underneath that is life that is indestructible, abundant and free. Inside of a spiritually frozen humanity is the solution to every problem. Did you hear what I said there? Inside the spiritually frozen human race is the solution to every problem. But we're closed off to that solution because of unbelief and spiritual ignorance and fear. And it is only the gospel. It's only the truth of the Trinity and of who the Son of God is and what he's done. It's only that truth that sets free the inner life that God designed us to walk in. It causes a river of life to flow out from the innermost being of people, transforming the wilderness into a garden, transforming neighborhoods, families, cities into a garden. A garden emerges in the heart of every person who wakes up to Christ and the fullness of the Father's love. So we're called to be a tree of awakening. And what that looks like, first of all, is us walking that out. Revealing that, right? Like through the petals of our lives. We're the branches on the tree. Through our fruitfulness, the world will know we're his disciples. Right? So as we walk out what true identity looks like, living in the righteousness that comes by faith, and then telling people also the same truth, to call them to that same righteousness, that blossoming glory will emerge around us in other people. So this is where the sunflower and the almond tree collide, right? Because we're to reveal the sun. We're to reveal the blossoms of his life. And this is the strategy we feel the Lord has given us, okay? The scriptures tell us that people are spiritually asleep, and they're asleep under the shadows of things like addiction, depression, guilt, idolatry, sin, all kinds of stuff. And our calling is to wake them up from their sleep through the gospel of grace, through the message of truth. Now, I'm not one for like catchphrases and mottos and mascots, okay? Like, we're not a sports team, okay? We're not a business either. Like, we are part of a universal body that's scattered across the whole earth, okay? It's cosmic, the reality of who we really are, beyond what we can comprehend. So I'm not into cute mottos and stuff, but this phrase that we put up everywhere and we talk about, awake, arise, advance, really captures how this plays out, how we will be part of fulfilling this vision of seeing the Son of God revealed in family and community. Okay, so the idea here behind these three words, awake, arise, advance, is that as we bring the seed of the gospel, okay, that royal sunflower seed of who God is and who we are, the truth, that has power in and of itself to awaken others. And there's countless ways that can happen, through personal relationships, through different things that we launch, different ministries, classes, connection groups that we have here. At the center of each thing is that seed of truth. But as people are drawn to the truth, as they begin to awake, we then call people to be immersed into the community, to be baptized into the body of Christ, into family. We want to restore the call of confident evangelism, not legalistic evangelism, a confidence that's rooted in knowing the truth and knowing the goodness of God, inviting people to receive this gift that's already theirs and to be baptized and to see many, many more people being baptized into the faith and not just going through a ceremony or ritual, but understanding baptism as the early church did, that you are being baptized into a church family and community. Like baptism was the bridge into the church. That's really what it was and how it started. And so we're going to start offering, in the future as this develops, baptisms on a regular basis. And you all are going to be filling the pools. Yeah. So as that happens, this is where Arise comes in, because we are called to rise up in love, which looks like relationship. We're called to arise together around the communion table, around church gatherings, in homes, and right here, and again, beyond here. And this is where we come together around communion. And like that bright sunflower, we begin to look more and more like the one we're focused on, like Jesus. And then as that happens, we then equip others to go out and advance this same message. And thus to start the whole thing over again. A whole cycle of life. As people are awakened to the truth of God's identity and their identity, and arise in the wholeness of family and community, they're then equipped to go out and advance with their giftings and callings to awaken others and bring that whole cycle of life, and to see these sunflowers, these gatherings of believers multiplied all over the place. So we were shopping one day, and these are, they're getting rid of paper and plastic, right? So now you got to use these bags. And I cut out one of these bags here that they hand out at ShopRite. And I saw it in my I think do we have the picture for the screen? So we can, yeah, there we go. Took a picture, so. So we saw this, and we were like, this is such a beautiful picture of the vision of the church, because obviously you see all those different leaves are recycling signs, right? And there's three parts to the recycling sign, just like, we're talking here about awake, arise, advance, and over and over and over again to bring a cycle of life instead of to break the cycles of death and bondage. And I just love it because it's different shapes and sizes. You see that? Like each person, each ministry that launches with multiple people is going to have a different shape and size and look to it. But we're all close together. We're all doing it together. And at the center of every ministry, of every person, is this same strategy and seed of awake, arise, advance, which is just sharing the good news through your life and through word, and calling people into around the communion table, into church and into church life, and equipping them to do otherwise. Can you put that back up? Because the last part, sustainable love, that gets at the vision of the church right there. It kind of all leads to that, something that is sustainable, that lasts. Love and family. You can just leave it up on the screen, guys. Thank you. So all of this explains the whole idea of us being a church and a resource center, okay? So on our signs and stuff, we say that we're both a church and a resource center. The church is not the building, okay? The church meets at a building, but the church is really everything we said before. It's a Trinity-like community. It's that composite flower of people drinking in the sun together. So we've also called it a house of wine, okay? The house of wine is not just a prophetic music service. The house of wine is really an analogy saying the same thing. Instead of being described as a flower that drinks in the sun, this house of wine thing is a group of people coming to drink in the wine of Jesus' Spirit. Same thing. And that, again, can happen here and all over the place. It doesn't matter. But our vision to start to wrap this up here, our vision is to see houses of wine, sunflowers, gatherings of believers in small groups, drinking in the sun, becoming like him as we share our lives together, our hearts together, like the Trinity shares everything in joy. And so that's the church. And then the resource center is really the organized mission of the people, the church body coming together to strategically impact our community with this beautiful seed of identity and hope. The resource center is where we use our building and other resources to facilitate things that we mentioned before, like classes or family events, or utilizing a space to share and network ideas, to share and release artwork, to launch nonprofits, other creative ventures that God ignites on the inside of people. All of these things are just different vessels to plant that simple sunflower seed. Is this making sense today? It's the word resource, I just wanted to mention this, is a word that comes from a Latin term which means to rise again. The word resource means to, and I found that out again during this whole True Church Rising thing we were doing. And I thought again, like, how perfect is that? Because we live in a world that has fallen, right? Like fallen into the dust, fallen short of the glory of the Trinity, the glory of true unity, the glory of true family and connection and wholeness and peace. People have fallen into the dust of trauma and grief and guilt and all kinds of things. And we want to mobilize together to help our neighbors, to help our community rise from the ashes into the new life that's already available to them. How you doing? And we don't want to give people a religion either. We don't want to give people religion. We want to invite them back home, right? Into the home of the Trinity, into the gladness of the Father's house. So this is why we've named ourselves the Almond Branch, okay? Not because, not an almond tree, first of all, because he's the tree. We're the branches. So we're united, to him. But the almond branch is kind of a tall order. The name kind of comes with this really big vision now that we've kind of laid it out. And this is the last thing I want to hit on before we transition. It's a big vision. It's beyond what we see in the natural. We have a number of challenges around us as a nation, let alone a church, right? We're in the midst of plenty of challenges, and we've had a number of major challenges hit us just as a church community, especially in the last few years. But I take serious comfort in the story of Abraham. How many people here know Abraham and his story a little bit? Abraham experienced a name change, and his name first was Abram. And then God came to him and said, you're going to have a new name. You're going to start taking it on now and signing all your documents with it. This is how you're going to introduce yourself. Your name is going to be Abraham. And Abraham means father of many nations. And so it's literally like, their names in the Hebrew were the words themselves. Like, so he would go around and introducing himself, hi, I'm the father of many nations. And he got this name before he had any kids. As an old man, well past the age of child rearing, he would have to introduce himself as the father of many nations. And that was already a kind of an embarrassing thing, a shameful thing, especially in that culture, to not have children. Already there was shame on someone and their family because of that. And he would introduce himself, hi, I'm the father of many nations. And people would say, oh, can I meet your family? It must be incredible. It's like, well, this is Sarah. And that's it. Hi. I mean, it probably was a little embarrassing. And this went on for about 18 years. 18 years. And it was a long time before the word came to pass. And, of course, in that time, God dealt with a lot of stuff, taught a lot of things to him, built some serious patience, and taught him how to hope against hope. Taught him how to hope against hope. And so in 2017, God gave us this name of the Almond Branch so clearly. We'd been the Journey Church for a pretty good season of time. And it felt like it was time to stop journeying and arrive somewhere. And not like we've arrived, but to say like it's time for us to build something that will be multi-generational. Something that goes far beyond ourselves. And that was kind of the thinking behind it. But to be honest, like I wrestle with this to this day, and I've struggled, and I've questioned the name. Even though the day that we announced it was one of the most powerful mornings we ever had as a church. It was an incredible morning. Part of it involved your mother, who's passed away, Mike. But if anybody remembers that, the song at the end and some of the prophetic words that happened in our little 7-week miracle story, I have it written down if you're interested. Many of you were here that day. But it was an incredible morning, and God will give encouragement like that to us. But there have been doubts that have come along the way since then, and I've had to call to mind Abraham and bring to remembrance this call that God puts in the lives of every person he gives a big vision to. There's always that journey, to go back to that word, of learning to hope against hope. He's always interested in bringing out more of Jesus in us. He's always interested in his Son coming forth, more than he is even in your vision or our vision. He's more interested in Jesus coming forth. And if we never fulfill all the dreams that we have as a church, if we never are able to do it, and this whole thing doesn't work, my prayer at the end of the day is that when we look back at this time we had together, that all of us here grew to become a little bit more like Jesus. And if we have that, like I've come to a place of surrender, like I'm going to praise God for that. I'm going to find my joy in that. And anything on top of that is going to be icing on the cake. If I can experience more of his glory and give him glory with my life, anything after that is just bonus.